Welcome, dear friends, for another exciting seminar from the Center for Indic Studies. For those of you who have attended past seminars, we are commemorating the India at 75 series. This is the 75th year of India's independence. And so we have had some seminars on that theme. And this so fortuitously also coincides with Sri Aurobindo's 150th birth anniversary, which is being celebrated very widely in many parts of India, including a very good initiative by the government of India. So we thought, why not take this opportunity to bring in an expert who can speak to us about Sri Aurobindo. I mean, I don't have to tell you, just as a biography, Sri Aurobindo's life is so fascinating. In fact, one of the books written on him, it's titled The Many Lives of Sri Aurobindo. Starting from his childhood to his education in England and then coming back, totally transformed man, then moving from Baroda to Calcutta and becoming part of the Anushilan Society, the Revolutionary Society, his incarceration in Alipur jail, the wonderful spiritual experiences that he had, and in which he also mentions that he saw Swami Vivekananda, not of course in physical form, because Swami Vivekananda had left his physical form, but before that he had also had a spiritual experience with Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda's guru, where Sri Ramakrishna said, Aurobindo Mondir Karu, create an ashram. And then this remarkable spiritual experience whereby he describes that everything that he saw in the jail, the inmates, the jail, physical belongings and all, he saw Vasudeva. So, and then when he was acquitted in that Alipur case, his very famous speech, which for those of you who have not read it, please do. It encapsulates so well his ideas, which he later, of course, expanded upon. And then from Calcutta to Chandanagar to finally Pondicherry, where he spent the last, I guess, 40 years of his life. And that to the last couple of decades, he hardly moved out of his room. His sadhana was so intense that he gave darshan, I believe, only 3 times a year. Sampadananda can expand on that. But his personality was so magnetic that people flocked to the Aurobindo ashram, knowing full well that they would not be able to see Sri Aurobindo very frequently. In fact, if you read the memoirs of one devotee, Dilip Kumar Rai is a very famous musicologist. He writes that when he was in the ashram, every night he would just look at Sri Aurobindo's room and the light emanating from that room. I mean, Sri Aurobindo used to work very late in the night. Just that light would kind of satisfy Dilip Kumar Rai's desires. So, but today we will look not just at his biography, but also what did he have to say about India's Renaissance. And as Sampadananda told me, not only India's Renaissance, but how India's Renaissance fits into this global architecture. So what is India's contribution, and what, more importantly, what can be India's leadership role in bringing light to global peace or humanity. So for that very exciting topic, we have none better suited than Sri Sampadananda Mishra ji, who comes to us from Rishi Hood University in Sonipat, Haryana. He is a very famous Sanskritologist. He has received many awards in Sanskrit, including the very prestigious award from the President of India, the Badarayan Vyasa Award. And if you go to his site, you can see these very interesting modules that he has made to teach Sanskrit to kids, to all ages. So teaching Sanskrit is his passion, but he is also a very close devotee of the mother. And for any serious analysis of Sri Aurobindo's life, you have to understand Sanskrit, because that's where most of the source material of Sri Aurobindo comes from. His essays on the Gita, Life Divine, his commentary on the Upanishads, all those things. Sanskrit is very deeply involved. So without further ado, we will now request Sampadananda ji to start his talk, and please mute yourself so that we can hear Sampadananda ji uninterrupted. And Sampadananda ji, if you can give your presentation in about 40-45 minutes, then we will open up for Q&A. Over to you, Sampadananda ji.
Okay, namaskar. First of all, my sincere pranam to all the elderly gurus sitting here, mentor like, and all those who are present here. And before I begin, I would like to remain in silence for a few seconds, invoking the divine presence, and then I will begin my deliberation. Oh. So thank you, Sukalyanji, for the invitation and for giving this beautiful introduction. You have set the platform. Sri Aurobindo, like already it's mentioned, like his birth as the mother, his collaborator. So she once remarked, in the sense that when we have the darshan days, like Sukalyanji mentioned about 3 darshan days, actually there are 5 darshan days. One is on Sri Aurobindo's birthday, and one is on the mother's birthday. And then now you have their Mahasamadhi days also, which are included as darshan days. And one more day which is included is the Siddhi Divas, 24th of November. In 1926, so Sri Aurobindo got his final realization and complete identification with the overmind, which he called as Sri Krishna. He became one with Sri Krishna's consciousness. So it was after 24th of November, Aurobindo Ghosh became Sri Aurobindo. So the word Sri, and he started putting his signature as Sri Aurobindo after 1926, 24th of November. And he retired into his room and never came out of the room till his Mahasamadhi on 5th December 1950. So during these 24 years, just imagine 24 years a person is confined into one single room, not talking to anyone, not coming out of the room, and doing intense sadhana. For what? For the liberation of the entire humanity. That is what is greatest sacrifice, the greatest balidan or Atma Nivedan for the whole nation, for the whole humanity. So it was his collaborator, the mother, who set up the ashram in 1926. and managed it up to 1973, 17 of November, when she left her body. So these 2 days are added to the darshan days. So what happens on darshan days is their rooms are open for public darshan, who can go quietly, be there for a few seconds, pay their homage, and then come back. There is no ritual. There is no fixed discipline in the ashram. Sri Aurobindo never wanted to have any predecessor, because his message was that the real Guru, the real Shastra is within every one of us. And then we must find every individual, as it was the realization of the Vedic seers and sages, that every individual must go deep within to find out the path which can lead to the realization of the supreme reality, which is the source of all. So that's how the ashram has been functioning. So there are no predecessors, there is no fixed discipline. The sadhana, every sadhak who joins the ashram has to find his own swabhav, own swadharma, and lead himself or herself on the path of progress, because the progress is the very aim of life. The moment we stop progressing, we become old. Progress is the very definition of the youthfulness, and progress is the very aim of life, and that has to be accompanied by all kinds of disciplines. But this discipline must not be an imposed discipline, but a spontaneously, organically grown self discipline, and one has to find for oneself. So that's how the sadhana happens in the ashram. There are around 150 units in the ashram. It's not just one campus, it is spread all over Pondicherry. And what one finds there, that all these different units which were created by the mother, she by creating these units, she created opportunities for everyone to work, find one's own work as per one's own swabhav and swadharma. So there is a garage, there is a petrol bunk, there is manufacturing unit for perfumes, for clothes, for agarbattis, and for many other food items. There are units like you have organic farming, there is flower garden and whatnot, like everything that the human being needs for his own development, inner development, which is resonating with one's own swabhav and swadharma. One finds those units in the ashram. So everyone is let free to follow up his or her own sadhana. And this is how it continues, a system where there is no guru, there is no predecessor, but everyone is self-led, and the system takes care of it. So that's a little bit of introduction to Sri Aurobindo's life and work and ashram life, very briefly. But it is vast, as Sri Aurobindo himself had mentioned, that no one can write his life history, because it is never on the surface of the earth. And the mother, while giving a message in one of the darshan days after Sri Aurobindo left, so she wrote, Sri Aurobindo's birth is an eternal birth. And that was questioned by some of the sadhaks, saying that how can eternal and birth go together? So she explained it very beautifully. She explained it that, like when I use the word eternal, it has different meanings in different levels of existence, different levels of consciousness. Physically, it means that this birth is going to happen on this earth eternally. It will go on happening ages after age. Psychologically, this is the birth which will be remembered eternally. And then she tells that there is a no, not psychologically, mentally, and then psychically, it is uh, the birth. No, mentally, it is the birth which will be remembered eternally. Psychically, it is a birth which will be recurring ages after ages. And then spiritually, she says that it is the birth of the eternal on the earth. So he says, depending upon which level of consciousness one is, one draws that meaning. Like we have in the tradition, every Veda mantra can be interpreted as at the Adhibhautika level, at the Adhidaivik level, and the Adhyatmic level. The same mantra will have three different meanings at three different levels. There can be many other. So that's why the Veda has many interpretations. You have a scientific interpretation, you have a geographical interpretation, you have spiritual interpretation, you have psychological interpretation, you have ritualistic interpretation, and you have astronomical and astrological interpretation. It is the same mantra depending upon the consciousness from which angle one looks at it. And all these words, they contain those meanings. These meanings, different meanings, are vibrant in the mantras. Anyway, that's a very different topic, but this is what Sri Aurobindo was. And there are many biographies which are written. So I'm sorry to say that the book which was mentioned by you, Sukalyanji, is banned in India, because that very book, the title says Lives of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo never lived many lives, but he lived only one life. That is the spiritual life. And that book has many objectionable passages which are factually wrong things which are maintained there, but very academically very sound book which has been written. So there is an agenda behind it. We will not enter into that thing, but there is the most beautiful biography by Srinivas Iyengarji, which was written during Sri Aurobindo's lifetime, and every line was reviewed by Sri Aurobindo himself. So that gives the authentic, factually right things about Sri Aurobindo. There is a biography by Rishabh Chand, biography by Satpremji, biography by Kirit Joshiji, the wonderful Prithvirajji. So many wonderful biography. A.V. Puraniji, who have lived with Sri Aurobindo, seen Sri Aurobindo, and then understood his life, the depth of his life from him directly. So these are the biographies which are enlightened biographies, which can transform and then give the a real view about Sri Aurobindo's life and work. So 1872 to 1950, this was the time period of Sri Aurobindo. And right from the beginning, he was not allowed to come in contact with anything Indian. So his father, Krishnadhan Ghosh, who returned from England as a medical doctor. So when he returned, he found that his community didn't allow him to live uh, in the community, because he had to he was forced to go through certain rituals which he didn't want. So he said, if this is India, if this is Indian tradition, I would not like my children to come in contact with anything Indian. So he allowed his children to be in convent schools, and then he then sent them to England, where Sri Aurobindo lived 14 years. It's like the 14 years of Vanavas of Sri Ram. And then he comes back in 1893 to India, and then joins King Gaikwad in Baroda. But most amazing thing is that when he comes back, and while living in England also, he was a part of many movements which raised voice against the British people. And then his father himself later kept sending newspaper clips of what torture was happening to the people of India by the Britishers. So he was well aware of what was happening in India. And then he also had realized in England that what was the purpose of his birth. And then he could realize that he had certain spiritual experiences during that time, that he clearly felt that he is born for a greater purpose. And what was that purpose? So he was in search of that. And then when he landed for the first time after 14 years of stay in England, so he said that a great calm descended into me. The moment he stepped on the soil, on the land of India, a great calm descended into him. And then he said that calmness remained with him for a long time. He carried that. So he continued, I mean, this is how it started, that when he came to India, started staying in Baroda, he started helping the king in his official work. Later he became a vice principal, and he was teaching English, French in the Baroda College, uh, now the Baroda University. So it was during that time that he secretly started participating in the national movement. And then his idea, and then later he came to Kolkata, and he established this national college, which is or he became a part of that national college, which is now Jadavpur University, where his real political national movement started. Like he publicly participated in the movement, nationalistic movement. And all that he did, I mean, in 1907 August is known as the birth of nationalism. His notion of nation, his notion of nationalism, his notion of Swaraj very much stand out than whatever we read about nationality, nationalism, nationhood, and Swaraj. So we will discuss a little bit about that. But Sri Aurobindo's whole political movement came to an end when he was imprisoned in Alipur jail. And this was mentioned right in the beginning by Sukalyanji. There's this beautiful story, and all these things are available on internet, where one can go and read. The whole Tales of Prison Life is an amazing book, very short book, originally written in Bengali, translated into English, that what happened to him in the jail. So not only that, Swami Vivekananda came in his, subtle body and visited him consecutively for 15 days, and then spoke to him all that he did not speak during his lifetime. The idea of evolution, involution, supermind, and whatnot, many things which he received from Swami Vivekananda. But most importantly, what he received, he said, it was the Sarvam Vasudeva Mayam Jagat Darshan. That was the most important realization for him in the jail. He said that everywhere he saw that the Krishna is standing. And then from that moment onwards, he just completely surrendered to Krishna. And then he followed the Adesh that he received from Krishna. He never exercised his own will after that. He just waited for the Adesh, and then he worked out the divine will throughout his life. So he says that he placed the Gita in my hand and then asked me to follow the sadhana of the Gita. So that's what he did. So throughout his life, he followed initially the sadhana of the Gita, and then slowly he became identified completely with the Krishna consciousness, which he called overmind in his terminology. So there are certain terminologies which one needs to understand when one enters into Sri Aurobindo, like the different layers of mind, like mind, physical mind, vital mind, proper mind, illumined mind, reasoning mind, thought mind, sense mind, and then go up to higher mind, intuitive mind, overmind, and then super mind. So these are the terminologies which one needs to understand. The word like psychic, the psychicization, the supramentalization, the spiritualizations, everything has a different connotation in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. And his yoga is known as the integral yoga, the supramental yoga, the yoga of surrender, the yoga of Atmanivedan, and the yoga of transformation. Transformation is another key word in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. And when he looked at the whole situation of the nation, so he provided a spiritual solution for the national development of India. And then he stressed that the rise of India, the national development of India, has much to do with the global development, the development of the humanity, the development of the entire world. So that's where he emphasized uh, that if India has to rise it must become herself. What was his idea of Indianness? What was his idea of national development? It is rooted in this, that India must rise by becoming herself. And then what was observed, that for so many years and till date, it continues even till date, India has been imitating to the rest of the world without being herself. And what does it mean that India must become herself? So this is where he said his whole idea of nationalism is rooted in the idea of Sanatana Dharma. And he said that Sanatana Dharma is the only nationalism of India. And this is where I will focus a little more on the idea of Sanatana Dharma that Sri Aurobindo has spoken about, and how that Sanatana Dharma is the very nationalism for us. And he says that India must stand up. India must stand up to deliver Sanatana Dharma to the world and to humanity. And while speaking about this, he also says that while other religions are, you know, uh, prepondering religions of faith and profession, Sanatana Dharma is a life itself. Sanatana Dharma is life itself. And it is a thing that has not so much to be believed, but to lived. And this is the Dharma that for the salvation of humanity was cherished in the seclusion of the peninsula from old. And this must be given the central importance when we are talking about the national development of India. And then he says that and repeatedly we find it in his essays on the Gita, when he talks about the Gita, when he talks about the Upanishads, when he talks about the Veda, when he talks about the Indian polity, when he talks about Indian culture, when he talks about India's nationalism in his ideal of human unity, even when he talks about poetry, nation is at the center. Nationalism, his idea of his notion of nationalism and nationality, nationhood is at the center of all his writings. So he says that his idea is that the rise of India is meant to help humanity to understand the value of Sanatana Dharma. And he says, let me read out a passage from his writing. He says that she means India, she does not rise as other countries do for self, and when she is strong to trample on the weak. She is rising to shed the eternal light entrusted to her over the world. India has always existed for the humanity and not for herself. And it is for humanity and not for herself that she must be great. And this is where the greatness of India rise. And when we say Mera Bharat Mahan, my India is great, we must keep in mind that it is for this reason India is great, that it has always been, her rise, her existence is for the entire humanity. It always believed in Sarva Bhuta Hiterata. This is the only definition of a rishi, of a muni, of a sadhu, of a sant, of all the leaders, the true leaders of India, Sarva Bhuta Hiterata. And that Sarva Bhuta includes everything, not just every nation, every human being, including everything that has manifested in this creation, from the most inert object to the most spiritually conscious beings. Sarva Bhuta Hiterata. And that is the crux of Sanatana Dharma. And this this Sanatana Dharma, like when Sri Aurobindo is speaking about this Sanatana Dharma, he highlights certain key points of Sanatana Dharma, which he says that it is the India's true nationalism and all the problems of the humanity. The India's true renaissance is the renaissance of Sanatana Dharma. That must be revived. And Sri Aurobindo says that, like at one place, he says that he has given us the three tasks. This I like this whole idea of Sri Aurobindo when he speaks about the three tasks. So he says, like, now there are three important tasks that every Indian or the Indian leaders, they have to take off. The first task is the recovery of the spiritual wisdom, the spiritual force that one finds in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in the philosophical texts, in the sacred texts in India. The spiritual wisdom, the knowledge, the treasure house of knowledge, all the Shastras. But not just the superficial meaning of that, but the true esoteric sense of the Shastras. This is the first task, that spiritual wisdom, that spiritual force has to be recovered in its true sense. The second task, he said, like once this force is discovered, realized, this wisdom is known, it must be percolated into every aspect of life, giving a new form. The foundation remains same. The foundation remains same. That is the spiritual foundation. But it has to take a new form. So Sri Aurobindo talked about new forms of literature, new forms of architecture, art, sculpture, new forms of polity, new forms of religion. Everything in new form. That new shape has to be given, but keeping the foundation the same. That spiritual force, that spiritual wisdom will be at the foundation. Then the third task that he says, that once this is done, the aspiration of ours must be to find out the solutions, that spiritual wisdom, that spiritual force, that all that the Sanatana Dharma has to contribute, or all that for which the Sanatana Dharma is, must be brought to the forefront for bringing a lasting solution to the crisis that humanity faces, the problems that the humanity faces. The solution must not be found anywhere else but in this spiritual wisdom, in this spiritual force. So talking about this, then he brings out this whole idea of Sanatana Dharma. That's why he spends much time in interpreting the Vedas. There are 3 volumes. So Sri Aurobindo's entire work is available in 36 volumes. And in these 36 volumes, so you have 3 volumes dedicated to the Veda: Secret of the Veda, Hymns to the Mystic Fire, and Vedic and Philological Studies. Out of 10,500 mantras of Rig Veda, Sri Aurobindo has interpreted more than 5,000 mantras in these 3 books. And he gives a psychological and deeper esoteric interpretation of the Veda based on the philology and psychology. And his philology is also a new philology. That's also very interesting. Like when he says, just a passing remark that I would like to make. When he came to Pondicherry, he had no contact with the Veda before he came to Pondicherry. Though he talked about the Veda, but he had no contact with the Veda. He studied the Upanishads, he studied the Gita, he studied Ramayana, Mahabharata, he studied the philosophical texts. He studied most of the classics, Kalidas, Bhartrihari, Bharavi, Magha. He studied the Puranas, Bhagavat Purana and Vishnu Purana. He studied Bhartrihari. He translated some of the portions. The entire Nitishatakam of Bhartrihari is translated, Meghadutam, Vikramurvashiyam. He did a lot of work on Kalidas, but had no contact with the Veda. But when he came to Pondicherry and came in contact with the Tamil language, So he says that is my acquaintance with the Tamil which inspired me to take up the Veda. And in his philological research, he took four languages: Greek, Latin, Tamil, and Sanskrit, made a comparison, and then presented a history of these four languages, which he said coexisted. These four languages coexisted. He called them as sister languages, cognate languages, sharing their experiences with each other. And then he followed up the root principle. And then his philology is a new philology, which he says when he was asked by Subramanya Bharati that, Subramanya Bharati, A.B. Purani, and then a few other Vedic scholars who used to sit during the evening time and listen to his interpretation of on the Veda. So it all sounded new to them. So Subramanya Bharati once asked that, look, we all have studied the Vedas with the Bhashyas and we are the traditional scholars on the Veda. But whatever you say, it sounds new. Where from you bring these new ideas connected with the Veda mantras? And it's all fascinating and it's all making sense. So he answered very quietly that, look, Sri Krishna has shown me a new science of language based on which a new interpretation of the Veda will be made. And this is the new science of language that one finds in his whole, writing on the philological studies, Sri Aurobindo's philological. In fact, that was my PhD thesis, that Sri Aurobindo's philology, how it contributed and how it is different from the comparative philology, because he was writing when the comparative philology was on rise. So, and the whole comparative philology, how it focused on dividing India on linguistic basis. And Sri Aurobindo's new philology talks about the unity of languages. So this whole conflict between the Aryan, Dravidian, and the linguistic divisions, it just gets dispelled when one comes to Sri Aurobindo's new philology. And philology and psychology, these were the two bases of his Vedic interpretation, where he talks about what is the true Sanatana Dharma, interpreting the Veda on the basis of the philology, psychology, and his own spiritual experiences and realizations. So when he talks about the Sanatana Dharma, and he gives a lot of importance to the realizations of the Vedic rishis, where he summarizes the Veda, and this is what he says that is important for India when we talk about India's national development. And on the basis of this, he again created, there are two beautiful writings, the national system of education and the national value of art. These two small books by Sri Aurobindo, where he talks about that the India's, for making every Indian realize the value of the true nationalism, true Sanatana Dharma, the entire education has to be revamped. The system, the British-led education. He talks about the national education, where he brings out this whole idea of Sanatana Dharma. He brings out the essence of the Veda. So how he summarizes the Veda, and he says that every Indian must become familiar with the essential, the fundamentals of Sanatana Dharma, which is rooted in the Veda. And he says that let me read out a beautiful passage from Sri Aurobindo, where he speaks about this, what is the Sanatana Dharma, and then how it is rooted in the Veda. Let me find out. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit long passage, so please have bear with me. But this throws light on like what exactly Sri Aurobindo wanted for India to realize. So he says, I seek a light that shall be new, yet old, the oldest indeed of all lights. I seek an authority that accepting, illuminating, and reconciling all human truth shall yet reject and get rid of by explaining it all mere human error. I seek a text and a shastra that is not subject to interpolation, modification, and replacement, that moth and white ant cannot destroy, that the earth cannot bury, nor the time mutilate. I seek an asceticism that shall give me purity and deliverance from self and from ignorance, without stultifying God and his universe. I seek a skepticism that shall question everything, but shall have the patience to deny nothing that may possibly be true. I seek a rationalism, not proceeding on the untenable supposition that all the centuries of man's history, except the 19th, were centuries of folly and superstition, but bent on discovering truth instead of limiting inquiry by a new dogmatism, obscurantism, and furious intolerance, which it chooses to call common sense and enlightenment. I seek a materialism that shall recognize matter and use it without being its slave. I seek an occultism that shall bring out all its processes and proofs into the light of day without mystery, without jugglery, without the old stupid call to the humanity, be blind, O man, and see. In short, then he summarizes this whole idea that he spoke above. Summarily he says, in short, I seek not science, not religion, not theosophy, but Veda, the truth about Brahman, not only about his essentiality, but about his manifestation, not a lamp on the way to the forest, but a light and a guide to joy and action in the world, the truth which is beyond opinion, the knowledge which all thought strives after. Yasmin Vijnate Sarvam Vijnatam. I believe that Veda to be the foundation of the Sanatana Dharma. I believe it to be the concealed divinity within Hinduism, but a veil has to be drawn aside, a curtain has to be lifted. I believe it to be knowable and discoverable. I believe the future of India and the world to depend. Please mark, and this is what is the essence of the talk today, the topic today. What he says that I believe the future of India and the world to depend on its discovery and on its application, not to the renunciation of life, but to life in the world and among men. And just look at in this single passage, he enumerates the idea of Sanatan Dharma, which he says is the only nationalism of India. And it was this idea of Dharma that created the foundation of India's civilization. And it not only created, it made it sustain throughout the ages, in spite of all attacks and all invasions. And the Sanatan Dharma, it aspired to live the ideal of perfection for the development of mind and soul of man. And it created more of the self-perfecting individuals who could lead the humanity towards the ultimate goal of life. And therefore, like Sri Aurobindo, he, while summarizing and while speaking about the Sanatan Dharma, so he says that, what is it? He said that it is for this Dharma and by the Dharma that India exists. And this is the only nationalism that Sri Aurobindo taught. And then he, in many places, he mentioned that the protection of the Dharma is the main task before all of us who belong to India. The main task of us is to protect this Sanatan Dharma with the understanding of the core essence of the Sanatan Dharma. And he again said that it is this Dharma, while defining the Sanatan Dharma, because he spoke about that the Sanatan Dharma, Veda is the Sanatan Dharma, and Sanatan Dharma is the very nationalism of India. And then what is that Sanatan Dharma? He said, let me read out another passage from Sri Aurobindo, where he says, it is a universal religion which embraces all others. If a religion is not universal, it cannot be eternal. A narrow religion, a sectarian religion, an exclusive religion can live only for a limited time and a limited purpose. This is the one religion that can triumph over materialism by including and anticipating the discoveries of science and the speculations of philosophy. It is the one religion which impresses on mankind the closeness of God to us and embraces in its compass all the possible means by which man can approach God. It is the one religion which insists every moment on truth, which all religions acknowledge, that he is in all men and all things, and that in him we move and have our being. It is the one religion which enables us not only to understand and believe this truth, but to realize it with every part of our being. It is the one religion which shows the world what the world is. That is the Leela of Vasudeva. It is the one religion which shows us how we can best play our part in that Leela, its subtlest laws and its noblest rules. It is the one religion which does not separate life in any smallest detail from religion, which knows what immortality is and has utterly removed from us the reality of death. And these were the marvelous words that Sri Aurobindo himself says while giving his Uttarpara speech. Another beautiful piece that I would request every one of you to read whenever you have time. A small speech, most important speech, where he puts his mission and then his realization of Sarvam Vasudevamayam Jagat after he came back from the jail, after he was released from the Alipur jail. So he says that these were the words which were put into his mouth by Sri Krishna. And then he emphatically says, and I repeat again, that repeatedly one finds this whole idea that Sanatana Dharma is India's only nationalism. And he also cautioned that any negligence of the Dharma will lead to India's decline. Therefore, he said at one place, he says that when the Sanatana Dharma declines, then the nation declines. If the Sanatana Dharma were capable of perishing, with Sanatana Dharma, India would perish. And that Sanatana Dharma has to be protected by any means. And the only protection of Sanatana Dharma is to live that Dharma, live according to the laws of that Dharma. And Sanatana Dharma is the law of life that sustains and advances all life throughout the universe in a very systematic manner. It is the unity of universal life, he says, that has been the teaching of Sanatana Dharma for ages. And this is where the significance of Dharma lies, Sanatana Dharma lies. And the seers and sages of the Vedic age discovered that that this unity of consciousness, this ekatva, and the equanimity, the samatva, these are the two things which are ultimately to be achieved by the evolving consciousness. And once this unity is realized within, and that can reflect in our collective consciousness, and that collective unity will bring the solution to every problem of the humanity, every crisis that the humanity faces. And summarizing, like if when we look at the expressions in the shastras, like ekam sad vipra bahuda vadanti of Rig Veda, or yatra vishwam bhavati ekanidam, where the whole universe is living in one nest, or ekam sad vipra bahuda vedanti, there is just one single reality which manifests in multiple forms. Or when the Upanishad says satyameva jayate nanrutam, how much importance this Sanatana Dharma gives only on the truth alone, annam brahmeti, that he says that this is the dharma which aspires to awaken the spirit in matter. It regarded the matter as Brahman, annam brahmeti. It says ishavasyam idam sarvam, everything is divine. It is the dharma which embraces all possible means to become one with the divine. Divinity is everything. That is the fundamental mantra of Sanatana Dharma, Sarvam Khallividam Brahma. It is that which accepts forms and encourages to see the formless in forms. As behind every form lives the formless. That is why Sri Aurobindo says, reject not form, because behind every form there is the formless. Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Vabhuva. Or you see, all is one is all in one and one in all. Sarvabhuteshu Chatmanam Atmani Sarvabhutani. These were the ideas which Sri Aurobindo brought in the context of nationalism, in the context of nationhood, and then inspired every Indian to accept Sanatana Dharma, live according to its essential principles, and then lead oneself by being in this Dharma. And that is how every Indian can serve one's own nation, and that is how the India's nationalism will grow, and that is how the national development of India will happen. And Sri Aurobindo confirms that the national development of India is good for the entire world. If India grows, India becomes the Vishwa Guru by realizing its own greatness, by being herself, then it becomes a great instrument in serving the entire humanity. So with these words, I will end my deliberation today. If there are questions, I will take up. Dhanyavad.
Thank you so much, Sampadananda ji, for this masterful presentation, distillation of Sri Aurobindo's life and works. And as Sampadananda ji said, it's spread over 36 volumes. And we now have access to that entire corpus. So you can go online. And as Sampadananda ji said, the 3 volumes on the Vedas and so many other things, you can have easy access. So I know, I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions for you. And before I go to the first questioner, I would like to express my thanks to the students. Some of you have joined in, which is so welcome and so nice to see. So if you have a question for Sampadananda ji, you can put it in the chat box or raise your hand, and I will try to locate you and then give you the floor. So let's see. Rekha ji, you had a question?
Should I ask one thing first? So Kalyanji, am I audible to you?
Yes, you're perfectly audible.
I'm RP Singh.
RP Singh ji from JNU.
Yeah, namaste. Thank you very much. So I'm happy to see this event taking place, and also Professor Ramarao Pappu and Ishwar ji is also there. So it's very nice to see everybody, and more important, the talk which Professor Sampadananda ji has given is indeed very fascinating. And in fact, whenever he gives a presentation, it looks like he is just reciting some kind of music. So it goes deep into our heart and mind, and then everything becomes so peaceful. Yeah. So with one expression only, he will say everything about it. That's fascinating thing about him. So, in fact, I appreciate and so many things you have discussed about it. So, since I have also been working on Sri Aurobindo for quite some time, maybe around 10 years, and with some PhDs and MPhil students there. And so I have a little query. It's a twofold one. First thing is that when you put it very rightly about the this Sanatan Dharma. So what exactly is the basis of the Sanatan Dharma? Would you like to place it within the sphere of the Ritas? Because the cosmic order which is there, the Rita in the Vedas, and there is one statement in the Rita that only humans can violate the Rita. So it is the duty of the humans to protect the Ritas. So, and if the Ritas are protected, then humans are also protected. Because it's the humans who can pollute the earth, who can pollute the water, can air, or even the space also. Yeah. So everything, if they interfere, they can pollute everything. And once these 5 elements are polluted, then nobody can survive on this earth. The way the wars are happening, the way nature is being exploited, and the way everything else is happening there. So placing it not the way like universal religion, but something which is cosmocentric in nature. Yeah, that cosmos is at the center of the universe, because universality still presupposes some kind of anthropocentric element into it. Because the way the universals came from the Greeks or from the Enlightenment and whatnot, so many things. So this is one observation and also comment I have. The second one is that sometimes the ideas, unless they are really classified, they create a lot of confusion. Because if you take up everything together in Sri Aurobindo, then it becomes, in a way that you are giving everything, but people are getting nothing. Let me just sort it out. Like if we say that human cycle and life divine are the texts pertaining to Vidya. Integral yoga, or the essence of yoga, is something which is called sadhana. And then you have Savitri as the kala. So you have Vidya, sadhana, and kala. 3 domains of reality. They are integrated. And that was the major contribution which Sri Aurobindo gave to the world, that they are integrated like the organs of human body, and not the way Aristotle or Immanuel Kant had thought about it. Because Aristotle also had theoretical knowledge, practical knowledge, and productive knowledge. Kant also had 3 critiques: pure reason, practical reason, and the judgment. But there is a split. There is no integration between them. So Sri Aurobindo has talked about the evolution and the involution through which the integration takes place into it. Yeah. So these are the 2 comments I have. If you can give any response. Thank you very much. So Kalyanji, Balramji has also joined. He has sent some questions also in the chat bot.
Yeah, thank you, Raghavendra for pointing out this. And the whole idea of Rita, like this is the basis of Sanatan Dharma, you can say, like in the Veda. And especially when Sri Aurobindo interprets it, he gives importance to these three words. So Ritam, not as an independent entity, but along with Satyam, Ritam, and Brihat. These 3 have to go together. Satyam, which is the existential truth; Ritam, which is the truth in action, the ordered truth. In fact, the idea of dharma comes from the Rita. The Veda speaks more about Ritam than dharma. So it gets translated into the idea of dharma later. And then the Brihat. Brihat is the the vast, the large. And in fact, these 3 You can equate again with Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat referring to Satyam, Ritam to Chit, and Bruhat as Ananda, because it is only in Bhuma and Bruhat that one can experience the Ananda. So Satchidananda and Satyam, Ritam, Bruhat are in the Veda, which is called the true home of everyone. Swam Damam. This is a beautiful expression, and this is what is the foundation of Sanatana Dharma, as one finds in the Veda. And if these three ideas are understood and then like made applicable into every aspect of life, then the Sanatan Dharma is lived in us. So this much I can offer with regard to the idea of rhythm, which is the truth in action, the action which has the rhythm, the symmetry, the harmony, the order. These are the things which are connected with rhythm. So if the action is devoid of rhythm, devoid of harmony, devoid of that vibrance, dynamism, then it is not rhythm at all. And this is what is needs to be lived, practiced, and by living, it gets protected. Um, yes, so there's one question which Satyanarayananji asks, that when you mentioned that Sri Aurobindo himself did not come out of the room and did not contact anyone, how was it possible that what has been written been verified? Yes, Sri Aurobindo did not come out of his room. He did not talk to others except few words, what was necessary for managing himself, or if it was necessary at all. So he spoke to the mother, but his communication with the world was only through letters. Out of 36 volumes, 7 volumes are only letters. What he wrote in response to the different questions asked by the people all over the world. So everything was verified, everything was responded by him in the form of writing letters. So which continued till the end of his life. And as Balramji says, since Sri Aurobindo, a realized person, did he predict and propose to any process for the realization of Sanatan in India? Yeah, that is what his whole formula, whole way of sadhana that he has enumerated in his synthesis of yoga in the essays on the Gita. Yes, that's what he proposed. And the processes is the integral yoga sadhana. And what does it mean? So it is centered in three things. Sri Aurobindo's yoga sadhana, what he proposed for the Sanatan Dharma, in realization of the Sanatan in India, that it has to begin with a sincere aspiration, aspiring for the light above, because his whole sadhana again is an expansion of the Vedic realization. What he speaks, he's summarizing the entire Veda, which is the foundation of Sanatana Dharma. So he speaks 4 lines, and these 4 lines are very, very important to remember with in the context of Sri Aurobindo's interpretation. So Sri Aurobindo says the first realization of the rishis was that there is a world, there is a light, there is a truth, which is beyond the light that we see or we experience here in this world. There is a world beyond the world that in which we live. There is a truth greater than the truth that we have here. So this is the first realization, that there is something beyond this ordinary world. Then the second realization of the Vedic seers and sages is that the man has to find out the way to ascend to this world beyond. the truth beyond, the light beyond. He has to make sincere efforts to ascend to. He must aspire intensely with all purity and sincerity in order to ascend to that higher world of light, higher world of truth, higher world of, like Ananda. This is the second realization. And the third realization, he says that there is a constant battle which is going on within the human consciousness, a battle between the forces of darkness and the forces of light, between the devas and asuras, between the positive forces and the negative forces. And then man has to get victory over the falsehood, on the death, on the dark forces. And the only way is to remain in constant company of the gods, or invoke the divine presence, constant remembrance of the divine. As in the Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha. So constant remembrance of the divine and then keeping the God as the comrade. Then the victory is sure. This is the third realization. And the fourth realization is that the essence of the Veda is ekam sadvipra bahudha vadanti. So there is but one supreme reality which manifests in different forms, different shapes, this whole diversity. And there should not be any rejection of the form, of the matter, of all that is manifest here, because the formless indeed is behind every form. So these are the four realizations which Aurobindo speaks when he talks about the Veda. And there he says in his synthesis of yoga, in the book The Mother, which is a small book which is the essence of all his sadhana, all his yoga. So he says the first step is the aspiration, an intense aspiration to ascend to what lies beyond. The second thing is the rejection of all that opposes, rejection of all that narrows down the consciousness, rejection of all that opposes the descent of light. Then surrender, a complete surrender. By surrender, he means like the first part of surrender, like he talks in three terms. Surrender is the beginning, then there is the self-giving, then there is consecration. So surrender, he says, that is a conscious will to surrender or hand over one's own responsibilities to the divine, knowing that man is nothing, it is just an instrument. So God is all powerful. So hand over one's own responsibility to the God, and then organize one's life's activities around that will, around that vrata that one has taken. And then the consecration, it becomes the natural consequence of the self-giving. So aspiration, rejection, and surrender are the three things with which the whole sadhana has to begin. And then when one continues with this, and then another important thing he says, that if you want to instill the divine in the heart, keep the temple clean. Keep the temple clean. So with all sincerity, devotion, with all perseverance, and everything that is conducive to the installation of the divinity within, that has to be followed strictly in the path of sadhana. And then very well thought out, like what should be our attitude from the most materialistic life to like every aspect of life. That is why Sri Aurobindo says that all life is yoga, that nothing in life has to be rejected, but everything has to be done in connection with the inmost being. So there is a complete roadmap which he has given for realizing the essentiality of Sanatan Dharma in this life.
Thank you, Sampadananda ji. And Balram ji had another earlier question, and I'm just reading it out to you. How can nationalism and universalism go together?
Yeah, when, like Sri Aurobindo says that the Sanatan Dharma is the only nationalism. So he does refer to that this nationalism and universalism, they go hand in hand, but it has to be realized within oneself by every sadhak or every Indian. Only when we realize that within ourselves, then we can see that in all. That's why one in all and all in one is the greatest realization that one has to have. And Sri Aurobindo has emphatically mentioned about it in
I'm
most
asking if
of
you
his works
can
are
hear
mentioned.
them.
So,
Sampadananda, can you hear me?
yeah, now I can.
My audible?
Yes, yes, sure.
Maybe not. Okay, I'm in the truck. Okay. Well, the reason I'm saying it looks like nationalism is at that time, during his time, was a popular term, and he may have just used it to convey some message. But by definition, nationalism does not go along with the universalism, because if you're talking about nationalistic, I understand nationalistic or Indian culture, that can be understood, but nationalism is, by definition, is really talking about your nation, not talking about the universe. So
Yeah, no,
that's
his
one. And
idea,
secondly, if you can,
yes, yeah, I understand that. But his idea of nationalism, say, for example, like he was even objected that, like NN Ghosh, like he said in his statement that this whole idea of national, like Sri Aurobindo himself has said about the three categories of people, three parties in India during his time: the loyalists, the moderates, and nationalists. But his idea of nationalism, his idea of nationhood, is very different than the other, because others had objected that there cannot be this whole notion of nation because of the diversity of language, of races, of religion in India. So this cannot be realized here. But his idea of nationalism was very different. So he always connects the idea of nationalism with the universalism, and that is why he connects it with the Sanatana Dharma. That is why he says that Sanatana Dharma is the only nationalism, where it is the Sarvabhuta Hite Rata is the nationalism for him. And he says that
so
India
my
cannot be selfish and live for herself.
that his
It
idea
has to live
hasn't been
for
realized.
the
That's why.
world. Sorry?
Yeah, well, I was saying that his great ideas is really talked about wonderful, but they have not been realized. Even though the person like you who are really working very diligently, and I'm sure a lot more than that, but it's nowhere to be realized. Maybe is that because of the contradiction of the definitions that we don't
Yeah.
understand,
It
or
needs,
impracticality? This is what I was asking, whether it's really practical.
yeah, I mean, his idea of Swaraj, his idea of nationalism, they need to be articulated clearly, which is, like, which some people are trying to do, but it is not yet, like manifest, or it is not yet been made clear. So,
Very good, Sadanandaji.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, and that is regarding something that you mentioned about renunciation. And you mentioned the very first verse of the Isha Upanishad. But then there is a lot of debate about the next line, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjita. And I know Sri Aurobindo had a very different interpretation of the word Bhunjita from, let's say, Shankara. So would you like to comment a little about what he meant when he said renunciation?
Acha, okay. So Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha is again the basis of what he says about all life is yoga, and then his whole idea of practicing the integral yoga. So Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha is that one, the tyaga here, the renunciation here is the renunciation of the sense of possession. And if we carry this sense of possession, then we can never experience Ananda in the life. This entire creation is meant for enjoyment. It's bhogartham, lilartham. That's what we see in the Shastras. But this bhoga, this enjoyment of delight can happen only in a state of brihat, only in a state of bhuma. Yovai bhuma tat sukham. And in that bhuma, state of bhuma, there is no sense of possession. It is the sense of possession which, which stops us enjoying the delight that exists in everything and being and happening. So that delight we are unable to experience because of the narrowness of our consciousness. Alpatva, nalpe sukhamasti. So this tyaga, for example, like why do we have more ananda when we see a sunrise, a sunset, something in the nature? Because sunrise, when we see that, like we are in a state of awe, a beautiful sunrise. And at that moment, there is no sense of possession. I can't say that, okay, today's sunrise is mine. No one has, like right over today's sunrise. It's so beautiful. One can, because the very sense of possession doesn't exist during that time. So that is what is tena tyaktena bhunjita, that tyaga and bhoga. And that tyaga has to become completely free from the sense of possession. It just, the delight has to be experienced. And that happens only when we rise above from our state of narrowness to the state of vastness.
Thank you so much. Any other questions for Sampadananda ji?
Yeah,
No.
I have one question, sir.
Just one moment, Satya. Let me
yeah.
just mention that as with all our seminars, this is being recorded and very soon we would put this on our Center for Indic Studies YouTube channel. Thank you. Go ahead, Satya.
Yeah. Sir, my question is that, Sir Aurobindo got realization. That's one excellent. Buddha has got realization. Excellent. Is there anything new he gave to the world which is not there, which is not covered by Vedas and Bhagavad Gita? Is there anything new?
Yeah, that's
Is there
true.
nothing new?
But
Is there nothing new there? What is so special? Yeah.
No shastra is perfect. There's no perfection.
Oh,
So
I tend to disagree. Shastras are perfect. Only we are imperfect.
Sorry, no. It is
Shastras
like
are perfect.
it is an
No.
evolving consciousness. Like the shastra is the outcome of the consciousness, and then as we evolve, the new shastras can arrive. And there are things which are in seed forms in all shastras. Okay, so that becomes expanded, and that leads to the realization of many things new. Otherwise, like this whole idea of evolution will not be there. As the consciousness evolves, it experiences new things, and it can have its own new shastra. What is newness in Sri Aurobindo is that when one reads, like I am trained in the traditional way. I'm also, like reading Sri Aurobindo. When I read Sri Aurobindo, the Vedas and Upanishads and the Gita made more sense to me than what I read in my academic, career. And the same way, Sri Aurobindo makes more sense to me because I have a background of the Vedas and Upanishads and the Gita and other Shastras a little bit. So he has expanded the seed ideas which are given in the Vedas and Upanishads. This whole idea of supermind. So, for example, you can equate supermind with the Vijnan, but the Vijnan was not very elaborately worked out the way Sri Aurobindo has worked out as the supramental yoga. So the way he talks about the Vijnanmaya Kosha or the Vijnan Jagat, the Maharaloka, the link world between Satchidananda, the Parardha and Aparardha. So this is the newness that one finds, like how he has given an expanded interpretation of the Vedas and Upanishads and then takes it to a higher height. This is what all acharyas do. So if we say, like, what was the new contribution of Shankaracharya when everything was spoken in the Veda? and the Upanishad? What was the contribution of all other acharyas? What was the new contribution of a Buddha when Veda was there, Upanishad was there? So how they make it practicable and doable and then bring out certain aspect of the truth in a concrete form for the human consciousness to realize in every aspect of life and apply it in every aspect of life. There lies the newness and uniqueness of every avatar, every acharya, every saint, every muni, every rishi who appears on this earth.
So, in essence, there is a newness only in the interpretation, right?
It can be
And
interpretation,
Vedas,
but
sir,
there are
and
realizations. For example,
Bhagavad Gita, you can have thousands of interpretations of every sloka, right?
yet,
And people
yet there
take
is a limitation. So
what
like
they
the
want.
Bhagavad Gita, so what is the ultimate realization in Bhagavad Gita? Yes, sir.
No, even the definition of renunciation is
To
different,
attain to the Brahmibhuta state.
right?
For example, like if you take the it can be interpretation, it is an extension. So this is how the new Shastras appear on the earth. Okay.
No, new interpretation of
We
Shastras.
cannot say that, like, because there is Veda, because there is Upanishad, because there is Gita, because there is something, and some
I think.
you cannot one shastric existence.
Okay.
The truth that has been explicitly or implicitly said in the Shastras.
Very good, very good.
Very good, very good.
Please, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for this wonderful, enlightening presentation that you made. And I'm sure people will now read more of Aurobindo and, of course, try to bring his thoughts into practice. Reading is fine, but one has to go beyond that. So, again, thank you all for joining in. Please put on your calendar our next event, that is on November 10th at noon our time. And that is the book launch of Sri Rajiv Malhotra's new book,